Okay, ready to go.
Awesome, thank you. So I will call this meeting to order at 6:01 p.m. today on September 5th, 2024. And I will now read the land acknowledgement. The city of Thorold is situated on treaty land. This land is steeped in the rich history of the First Nations, such as the Hadiwandurunk, the Haudenosaunee, and the Anishinaabe, including the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. There are many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit people from across Turtle Island that live and work in Niagara today. The city of Thorold stands with all Indigenous people, past and present, in promoting the wise stewardship of the lands on which we live. And with that, I will ask, are there any declarations of interest? Not seeing any. And can I get a mover and a seconder to adopt the agenda? You just want to raise your hand. Janice and Cam, thank you. And I'll call the question. All those in favor, if you can just raise your hand, terrific. Any opposed? Not seeing any. Great. Okay. And looking at, that was the adoption of the agenda. Looking at the adoption of the minutes from the DIAC when we met on June 6, 2024. Can I get a mover and a seconder to adopt the minutes? All right, Dennis and Cam. And I'll call the question. All those in favor? Terrific. Any opposed? Not seeing any. Okay, very good. Okay, so I am so thrilled and happy to now call upon Cassie Oginu. Cassie, you're going to have to correct me on how to say your last name.
No worries. Ogani.
Ogunini, thank you. So Cassie's the manager of diversity, equity, inclusion, and Indigenous relations at Niagara Region. I've had the pleasure of working with Cassie in the past when I was on the board for the Niagara Region. And today, Cassie will be presenting the Niagara Region's Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Action Plan. So after the presentation, we can present some questions for Sandra. And with that, I will hand it over to you.
Excellent. Thank you so much. And thank you for having me. I know you've been trying to have me come for a few months, but over the summer, the schedule just did not align. So I'm glad to be here finally today. It looks like I will be able to share my screen. So I'm going to do that. All right, Renee, just nod your head if you can just see the title page right now.
Yep, we're all good.
Perfect. Okay, as Renee said, I'm going to be talking about the Niagara Region Diversity, Equity, Inclusion Action Plan, and we'll get right into that. There we go. So the development of our Diversity, Equity, Inclusion Action Plan spanned nearly 2 years, beginning in November 2020 and ending in September 2022 when Regional Council approved the plan. When we were starting with this work, we began with an environmental scan to assess the current state, what was happening at the region as an organization and the region as a whole and as a geography. We collected staff and community input from 1,670 staff surveys, 1,599 community surveys, and focus groups with 110 staff and 81 community members. We summarized all of that information into 5 reports that can be found on our Niagara Region Diversity, Equity, Inclusion webpage. From that information, DEI staff and members from our Diversity, Equity, Inclusion Advisory Committee worked with community members to create a draft action plan. We presented that draft plan back out to about 180 staff and community members to check in, make sure that we were on the right track. We made some tweaks based on that feedback, and then we incorporated that into our final action plan. We've recently launched or are in the process of launching, actually, because we realized that there was a few small accessibility issues that we need to address with the company. But we it's ready to launch, I should say it that way, our public dashboard showing the action plan. So this is what it currently looks like. You can see we've got the status, the purple section of this circle here. 31% of our actions are on track. 47.7% are upcoming and 20.5 are completed. And of all the different actions that we have set out. We're about 35% of the way through the action plan, which is great since we only technically started in 2023. So the vision of this plan is that Niagara Region is welcoming and inclusive, where diversity and equity are reflected and valued. And our mission is that the people of Niagara advance equity, build welcoming and inclusive communities and workplaces while eliminating barriers and forms of discrimination. We have 6 focus areas. The first one is inclusive workplace culture, leadership, and accountability. This is about enabling in an organization where leaders are accountable and provide an environment where staff and community members feel heard and respected. The picture on the screen here is of Chantel Berry and Chelsea Robinson, who received the top award in our first year of a new category of an corporate employee recognition program, which we know as CERT at the region. 18 additional employees demonstrated contributions to advancing diversity, equity, and inclusion, and also received awards in this category. We are currently developing a diversity, equity, inclusion handbook that will help regional staff integrate diversity, equity, and inclusion into their daily work. And in October of last year, we had our first Niagara Region DEI Community of Practice meeting with over 60 people present. There's now over 100 people that are part of the group from over 80 organizations across the region. That group brings together community organizations in Niagara that are interested in DEI work, want to integrate DEI into their organizations, and work together towards DEI-related actions in the community. This group has met twice so far in 2014 and will be meeting again in October. We're currently working on a statement of purpose to help guide the group moving forward. Focus area B is increased understanding and humility through learning. This is about providing knowledge, skills, and learning opportunities for staff, counselors, volunteers, and community members to increase their ability to understand and use DEI principles and demonstrate cultural humility. The Diversity, Equity, Inclusion team developed learning curriculum for staff, counselors, and volunteers. In 2023, 1,272 non-people leaders and 61 people leaders in long-term care completed our Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion foundational e-modules. 44 new leaders completed our Inclusive Leaders course through the Leaders Edge program. As of the end of August, the e-modules have been rolled out to all staff, and 60% of all staff have completed that training, which is 2,383 out of 4,004 staff. And that all staff is a mandatory training that they all need to complete by the end of 2024. And then we'll have a new set of training for next year. So each year we have a 3-year learning plan. And each year there's going to be about an hour of e-modules that all staff will have to complete. Focus area C is diverse workforce reflective of Niagara's community. This is about using evidence-informed best practices to recruit, hire, retain, and promote a more diverse workforce. Our team supported our human resources with the development of a new people plan, which is basically kind of our internal, how do we support our employees plan. Diversity, equity, and inclusion related interview questions, and an employee equity statement. For example, our Niagara Emergency Medical Services incorporated a DEI-related scenario as part of their candidate selection process. The scenario includes diverse staff members and is reflective of real situations paramedics face in the field. It reveals the candidate's soft skills around communication, if they treat patients with respect regardless of their identity, and how they deal with difficult situations. We also administered an employee engagement survey earlier in 2024 to gather up-to-date information about staff. Oops, I jumped to that one just before I finished all my notes. It included updated feedback on the progress of diversity, equity, inclusion at the region, and we reached an amazing 71% of our staff. So we had a really high response rate. Currently, we are analyzing the data from that. So we had 6 demographic questions in it as well, and we will be bringing a report to the Niagara Region Diversity, Equity, Inclusion Committee by the end of the year. Focus area D is programs and services meeting the needs of everyone. This includes providing evidence-informed best practices and resources to incorporate DEI principles into Niagara Region programs and services. Action items in this focus area have not yet started, as they mainly rely on the completion of our Diversity, Equity, Inclusion Handbook to review the NAG region programs. We are collaborating with the accessibility team this year on community engagement to inform items in the Diversity, Equity, Inclusion Action Plan, including things such as reviewing the procedures for providing accommodations during programs and services. Focus Area E is addressing discrimination. This is about reviewing and revising policies and processes in partnership with diverse communities to address and reduce discrimination experienced in Niagara. Consultation has begun on how to incorporate diversity, equity, inclusion impacts as part of reports to council and corporate leadership team. Once the handbook is completed, we will support the review of policies and procedures considering diversity, equity, and inclusion. And continued collaboration is planned with the DEI community of practice to support town hall dialogues with diverse communities on discrimination issues that we are aiming to lead to the creation of at least one community action table. Our final area is inclusive communication. This is about providing clear, inclusive, representative communication for staff and community members to showcase significant dates, provide key information, and recognize leaders that advance DEI. Each year, we create a calendar of significant dates that is shared with all staff and available on our internal website. At the end of each month, we provide a summary of dates in the next month, and we have seen a large increase in engagement with these monthly summaries. Additionally, we select a few dates per month, spotlight dates is what we call them, that highlight important cultural, religious, and diverse events. Our calendar of significant dates has been widely embraced, particularly at our long-term care homes, where they use it to plan activities, meal plans, and cultural displays. The photo on this slide is from Gilmore Lodge, one of the region's long-term care homes in Fort Erie, during Cultural Heritage Week. Moving forward, we are working with the accessibility team to ensure communication platforms are accessible and inclusive, materials are presented in plain language, are culturally appropriate, and depict the diversity of Niagara, and that the signage in Niagara region facilities is accessible. So that's the summary of our plan. Justin also mentioned that you would be potentially interested in some information about incorporating DEI or looking at DEI in policies. So I added a slide here about that. This is not, policy work is not my area of expertise. And we at the region decided that we needed to do a lot of the other foundational work before we started working in policies. So this is a chapter that we're currently working on for our handbook and is still a work in progress. So just a couple of best practices pieces that we've found so far. So there's two different kinds of diversity, equity, inclusion, and policy when you talk about that. The first kind is DEI specific related policies. So this is things such as a respectful workplace or anti-harassment policies, that type of thing. So that's, you know, if you have a policy that specifically is speaking towards a DEI related topic. The other area, which is much bigger, much more involved, and I think where there's a lot of opportunity for changes and integrating diversity, equity, inclusion throughout an organization is reviewing all policies, considering diversity, equity, and inclusion. Or when you're creating a new policy, making sure you're considering diversity, equity, inclusion from the very beginning. So a couple of different points relating to that. So if you are reviewing or creating a new policy, these are some things to think about. So consider bias regarding the policy. Seek to understand systemic barriers that might affect some groups more than others. Are there any stereotypes or discrimination associated with this policy? Who was impacted by the policy? Are there any negative impacts for some groups of people? If so, how will those negative impacts be addressed or mitigated? At the region, we have a list of what we call the 12 dimensions of diversity. And this is groups that we've identified here in Niagara that need to be considered anytime you're creating or implementing or evaluating any programs, services, plans, or policies. So they are 2S LGBTQIA+, ethnocultural groups, faith-based groups, francophone, gender, Indigenous, new immigrants, older adults, people experiencing homelessness, people with disabilities, people with low income, and youth. So what else to think about? Who has been engaged in the review or development of the policy? Whose voices were heard and whose voices were missing? Once you have the policy set up, how will it be communicated? Ensure that that is done in an accessible way and in places where the people who are impacted by that policy will find out about it, whether it's new or whether there's been changes. Think about the words used and literacy levels, and if it should be translated into other languages than English or French. And then finally, how will the impacts of this policy be measured and reported? So that is not just a one-off thing, but you need to be thinking about the bigger picture, longer range. How are you going to measure what might happen? There's often things that are unintended. So how will you see if that's happening and address that if it does? So that's what we've got for today. You can also find out more information about our DEI action plan on our diversity, equity, inclusion webpage from the region. You can always also email us at diversity@nagregion.ca, or Justin and your team have my direct email address as well. So thank you very much, and I'll stop sharing if you have any questions.
Thank you for the presentation, Cassie. That is phenomenal to see it live and in action now, and that there's a web page and dashboard. So I will turn it to the floor. Does anyone have any questions? Cam.
Hi, sorry. So Cassie, I don't mean to put you on the spot, but I do work for the region, so I do have a question kind of, I guess, internally. The first one being for our group, so the Thorold DEI committee. You mentioned earlier in your presentation, there is a like a community of practice type of meeting that happens amongst a variety of groups in the region. Is there any way for somebody that's participating in this panel to join that meeting so that we are able to relay the message and be a part of the greater picture and bring that back to the Thorold committee?
Great question. It's one we have been going a little bit back and forth about recently, trying to figure out how can we get the advisory committees incorporated within that group. Right now, it is the way it's set up is it's for organizations, so like the YMCA and whatnot, and that's the focus of it. We are still figuring out the terms of reference. So we have our next meeting of that group is meeting in October. And that is actually one of the things that we're planning on discussing with the group, whether or not, do they want to have advisory committee members come in as part of that group or not, basically. So, we are helping to support that group, but we're trying not to be the ones that are directing everything from it. And so it's one of those things where it's not part of the group, but there's an opportunity potentially for it. So we will have that discussion and then I'll bring it back to I'll let Justin know how that goes.
And we do have a question, Justin. I'll get to you in 1 second. But Councillor O'Hare was asking when the DEI handbook might be ready.
Question. At the moment, we are aiming for the end of this year for us to have it done internally. So it is at the moment going to be a document that's just going to be for NAG region staff because it has links to like a specific policies within the region. But next year, part of the plan is we have a few different people that have offered to help. Translate's not quite the right word, but basically take that information and adjust it so that it would be available for organizations outside of the region. So it will take out like our policy specific references and that sort of thing. So I don't have a timeline as to when that will be, and it might be more of a chapter by chapter sort of release. Our initial aim was for it to be on the NAG region website, which is going to be having a big revamp over the next couple of years. So ideally, once that revamp of the webpage is done, that our handbook will be good for external sharing as well. Ideally, those things will line up.
So thank you. Over to you, Justin.
I just wanted to let everyone know that Nicholas DeBono, our city clerk, who is the staff liaison for this group, does attend the community of practice meetings as well. But he's unfortunately not able to be here today.
Awesome, thank you. Any other questions or feedback? Cam?
Yeah, sorry, I had a two-parter. So this one's coming from a more personal perspective. So yesterday, Cassie, you would have received an email from Dr. Kismani regarding the public health changes that are happening for the Niagara region. Do you anticipate any change with the accessibility approach to the region? Because I used to work for Motion Cares. So one of my big goals was to try and help meet the AODA standard of accessibility for businesses by, I believe it was 2026 pre-pandemic, so that's likely been extended. But has that kind of changed or shifted at all to how we're going to try and impact communities to make, storefronts more accessible, older buildings? Niagara's got some older community centers that are not ramp accessible, or storefronts that don't have the ability to be entirely accessible. So any kind of change that's happening there that you know of within 48 hours? I do apologize for that question to put you on the spot.
No, not a problem. So we do have an accessibility advisor at the region, and they're currently working on our multi-year accessibility plan. So they've been doing a lot of community engagement throughout the year. I think we started about February, and they have just finished or finalizing this month, I think, their community engagement report. So summarizing all the feedback that came from the different engagements, and then are starting to put together the plan for what the region can be doing moving forward. I would say most of those things, from my knowledge, are not they're not really looking out at community, so community storefronts and that sort of thing. It's more so looking internally at the region, making sure regional facilities are accessible, which if you weren't aware, there's actually 92 regional buildings. Not all of them are publicly accessible. So there's a lot of buildings within the region. I was recently asked to provide some advice on wastewater plant that they're revamping some of the staff area, and it didn't have an accessible washroom in it, for instance. So they're going to be putting that in. So that's more so the focus of that plan. I don't believe it does have any community facing aspects to it.
Yeah, thank you. Any other questions? You can just raise your hand. Okay. Not seeing any, so thank you so much, Cassie, for joining today. I know it's been logistically a little difficult to coordinate it, but it's really fantastic. I think this is great information. We definitely look forward to hopefully some collaborative initiatives between our DIAC and what's going on at the region. And we look forward to seeing the handbook, which I think could prove beneficial for our team as well. So please keep the relationship going, and just give thought to us when there's things rolling out on your end. And yeah, thank you. Have a great evening.
Welcome. I forgot one other thing to mention is that the region is part of a diversity, equity, inclusion was chosen as an area of focus by the CAOs in the region. And so we're providing some support through some shared services. So some things like training and action planning, I think, are some of the ones that they're looking into. So I believe there's a CAO meeting tomorrow that they're going to be talking about that at. So there may be some additional supports coming to Thorold as well through that. So just to be aware of that there are other ways that we're connecting and supporting with you as well.
Amazing. Thank you so much.
All right. Thanks. Have a great night, everyone.
You too. All right. Any thoughts from that for this group? See Councillor O'Hare typing. His mic's not working too well. He's working with the BIA to try and address the entrances into downtown businesses, which are not all accessible. And Councillor O'Hare, I was trying to share with this group because it came up on LinkedIn, but they did a similar initiative in Fort Erie. So the CAO of Fort Erie did that stopgap, those planes, or I don't know how you address those. But they did them throughout the downtown Fort Erie Court. So that serves as a good example as well. Okay, any other thoughts? Okay, Councillor Hare will reach out to Fort Erie. Awesome. Janice.
Hi, thank you so much. This just relates to the topic of accessibility. Just since the school year has started up again, and I walk my daughter to the bus stop, so I've noticed this issue where certain stops aren't where there are sidewalks. And I reached out because for instance, the stop that is assigned to my daughter, it's assigned where there are sidewalks, but then where she's dropped off and picked up, we have to go where there aren't sidewalks. And there's a stretch there where kids from different, areas than my subdivision would have to then walk on the street in the wintertime to get to a sidewalk to get home. So I don't know if we know of who to reach out to about this issue, because I did reach out to like the school bus, I'm trying to think of the name now, the Niagara Transportation, like for the school buses.
Yeah.
But they didn't really have like a solution. So I don't know if there's like a way or who I would contact about getting sidewalks installed so that, the children are able to safely walk to their homes once they're off the bus.
Yeah, Justin or Councillor O'Hare, if you have any ideas.
And just so I'm clear, it is a City of Thorold road, right? Not a regional road area,
Yeah.
right? So if
Yeah.
you contact city's engineering department,
Okay.
and we also have on our website mostly for traffic calming measures, what our website is dedicated to, but things like sidewalks you can put in, and they can
Okay.
walk you through the process of what is needed to request something like that and the steps
Okay.
involved.
Okay, because it does look like they have like a place cut out where you would think a sidewalk should be, but it's not there. And then when I had talked to the transportation, they said according to their map, there's sidewalks, and I'm like, well, there's not, yeah.
And it's possible that that might be a future plan, is maybe why it's set up like that. But yeah, the best would be
Yeah.
engineering department. They'll have more information.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much.
And Councillor O'Hare is offering that maybe you guys can meet to chat about it.
Okay, that would be great.
Great. Any other feedback or thoughts? Okay, not seeing anything. All right, so in terms of correspondence, days of significance were attached to the agenda and correspond from the Niagara region regarding June, July, August, and September 2024 days of significance. Everyone all good with that? Yeah. Okay, moving on. So Cesar Rodriguez has resigned from the committee. But we have put out, Justin provided a great update, and Justin, I'll hand it over to you so you can give us an update with regard to recruitment.
Yeah, the recruitment for vacant committee positions closed recently, and council will be filling positions on Tuesday. And so this committee received a few applications, so we should likely be getting filling the 2 positions that we have.
Yay, so we'll get some new members and hopefully they'll stick around a while. All right. So with regard to committee business policy work group, any updates or discussion? I appreciate we're just coming off of summer, so. No, not seeing anything. Any updates around the work plan, strategic planning working group? Not seeing any. Accessible entrances, any discussions? I know we touched on that, Councillor O'Hare, so you're going to do a bit more digging. Okay, sounds good. And Justin.
The accessible entrances was referred to the Joint Accessible Advisory Committee as well, and they briefly talked about it at their last meeting, and they said they will do what they can to support this committee on this initiative.
Oh, fantastic.
So whatever help you need from them, they said they are open to working with this group.
Very good. Cam.
Sorry, back to a question for Justin. I know it's difficult to get funding for a lot of things when your budget is preset for the next year at this time. So are we, when we're trying to plan for, you know, the storefront type accessibility situation, is it due to a lack of funding that's been being put aside or provided by the town, or is it yeah, like is there more to it than just a funding approach? That's just kind of where I'm wondering.
So I know Councillor Hare will have some more info, I know, but as far as I know, it's really up to the businesses to do this, not necessarily the city, if I'm correct. And then this program is for businesses to assist with putting the ramps in, and they will pay a certain amount. O'Hare, I think Councillor Hare said like $400 or something. And I think it's the business will pay a certain portion, and then this group will help cover the costs and so forth, some of the costs. And then the question on the city side is this something that the city wants to try to set up something around or not, would be the question, I suppose. So right now there is no funding because nothing is in place, of course, but that doesn't mean that that can't change in the future, of course, if council is willing to do it.
Yeah. Anything else related to this? Nope. Okay. Community resource information, any discussion? Seeing any? And so we'll open up to roundtable. Is there anything anyone wanted to put forth to discuss? What I will ask, Justin, our next scheduled meeting, do you have information with that?
November 7th
November
is the
7th.
date.
Okay.
And we'll have a schedule for the next year for this committee to approve.
Okay, that sounds great. Okay. So with no roundtable items, oh, sorry, I did actually say it. I just needed to scroll down. So the next meeting will be held on November 7th, 2024. And if there's no further business, then we will be adjourning this meeting at 6:33 p.m. So with that, I bid you all a wonderful evening, and we shall see you in November.